Welcome to Even Just a Little, where we explore the beautiful gift of choice, tiny trusts toward big freedom, those moment-to-moment decisions we make that build life. I am so happy today, so thrilled actually to have joining me for Even Just a Little, the fabulous author, Mike Foster, a best-selling author of The 7 Primal Questions. He's also a speaker, a coach, and in meeting him, he introduced himself as a combination of Navy SEAL and Mr. Rogers, and I found that to be very true. And I believe a little heavy on the Mr. Rogers. There's a lot of kindness in this fellow, but honestly, the biggest kindness that you bring is helping us to be honest with ourselves. So, I have a few quotes of yours that I thought might be a nice place to dive in. I do think you're a master at simplifying what many of us have been trying to decode for years. I think that might be something you actually have said. And with that being said, you said we each have a question seared into our being, I believe. And can you kind of, maybe that'd be a good jumping off point, and welcome to what do you mean by that and why is that important? And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Sherry. I'm excited about our conversation. Yeah, the whole idea of simplifying and helping us understand ourselves is really the focus of all of my work and everything I do in my writing and workshops and my coaching, because I really believe that if it's simple, if we can keep things simple, we can keep it actionable. And sometimes when we think about our stories, and especially our early childhood and perhaps some of the traumatic experiences of our stories and some of the painful parts, it tends to be can be very overwhelming, very confusing, have a lot of complexity attached to it. So what I'm trying to do is helping people understand the complexity of their lives and who they are and the complexity of their stories through a simple question that gets imprinted early on in their childhood. And so this is where my work revolves around, of helping people identify that primal question and seeing how really discovering actionable items that we can create for our lives and our relationships and our marriages and our work and our vision. All of that can be understood through a single question that we've been carrying for most of our lives and been asking for most of our lives.
How did you land with 7? How did you I know it took a lifetime of work for you to simplify this, to communicate it to us. So tell us a little bit about your process of discovering these 7 questions.
Yeah, well, I've been doing this type of work, Sherry, for 20 plus years now, just helping people in all aspects of their life, build emotional fitness, work through pain, trauma, failure, whatever it might be, maximizing their strengths. And so I've been doing this type of work for a very long time, but really it was in the last 5 years. And I've been a big believer in simplicity. I think oftentimes, therapy and just coaching and stuff can just get way too complicated. And so for the past 5 years, I've just really been trying to work on understanding our core drivers and our core motivations in terms of understanding our behaviors and our choices, why we believe what we believe, why we do what we do. And so which led me, the work actually started with my own clients that I was working with in terms of the primal question, and really honing in on that number one emotional driver that we have, really the core need that we have in our lives as human beings, and helping them identify that. And so it's been a combination of 32,000 assessments, 22 group labs, thousands of hours of talking with people about their kind of core motivators, their primal question, understanding all the different parts of that. And when I first started working with clients, it started with just kind of an open-ended question of like, hey, do you think there's a question that you're trying to get answered in life that you ask over and over again? Subconsciously, of course, none of this is actually, we're not aware of this question. We just ask it in all various ways. And so it started very open-ended and heard hundreds and hundreds of different versions of different questions, and then started narrowing it down to 12 and then to 10, and then, eventually got it to 7. And I think 7 is really probably the most pure form of understanding, again, the apex emotional need that we have that drives our life is represented in one of those 7 questions. And the question, I'll give you the questions real quick because they all represent a core human need that we have, an emotional need that we have as human beings. I think we have all 7 of them present in our lives, but there's one known as your primal question, that primal need that really drives the ship for you. And so question number 1, primal question 1 is, am I safe? Primal question number 2 is, am I secure? That has a lot to do with financial security and resource. Question number 3 is, am I loved? Which is this need to feel known and seen and heard. Question number 4 is, am I wanted? Which is about the need to be pursued and connected in relationship. Question number 5 is, am I successful? Which is the core emotional need for achievement and recognition and winning. Question 6 would be, am I good enough? Which has to do with kind of our value and who we are. And oftentimes, we will have to have every kind of struggle with perfectionism or the sense that we are not enough and inherently flawed. And then question 7 is the question, do I have a purpose? Which is really this idea around the need to have meaningful impact in your life, the need to have purpose in the work that you're doing and really understanding the bigger picture of the things that we're doing. And so those 7 needs are all, again, all of us will have bits and pieces of all 7, but there's one of those questions that's driving your life.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, and when I first was introduced to your work, I was in a group setting, and it was so interesting to me to watch how, as various ones in the group shared, how some of us were surprised. So you can take an assessment, an online assessment, which I will link in this podcast for people to access. But you take an assessment to discover what your primal question is. But I was a little bit surprised at how many people were shocked at what what they discovered. But I think the really amazing part of it was how people resonated with, once they discovered their primal question, it was like a light bulb that went off, and just such a gift, and how hitting that nail right on the head, how I know that's how it made me feel. It made me feel, and my primal question is, am I loved? And it's absolutely about wanting to be seen and heard, and just affirmed. So for people to benefit from your program, they can take the online assessment, and then after they discover what is really their driving force, what's next?
Yeah. Well, you bring up a great point that a lot of times when we start having these conversations around kind of the primal question and that core need that we have, number one, people are shocked by it because I think in many ways there's not a lot of room for the discussion around kind of our core need or our core want. And so sometimes there's some resistance to even having a need. Okay. Like the idea of having a need. There's a lot of us grew up in homes or have been in contexts where having a need is actually, there's not permission for that.
Okay. Or shown as weakness.
Shows weakness.
Yeah.
Your life is supposed to be about meeting other people's needs. And so the conversation has at times a resistance to it because we just don't know how to do it. And we've been taught, unfortunately, a lot of bad things about actually having a need. And then the second thing that is true, and I encourage your listeners to visit primalquestion.com. The assessment's on there. It's totally free. It takes about 5 minutes, and you'll get your results, and you'll get some coaching and a little video and some other action items. But I think why it's so profound and powerful, even though it's so simple, is that it actually gives language to something that we have known about ourselves for forever, but just didn't have the words to express it in sort of this concise, real, authentic way. And so it's a very transformative experience for people. And so the first thing to do is actually take that quiz, take that assessment at primalquestion.com. And then secondly, it is a sense of then taking that question and seeing how it influences our lives, both in the good and the bad. And one of the things I talk about in the book is the way the model works is we have our primal question. Like for you, your primal question is, am I loved? My primal question is, am I safe? So when we get yeses to that primal question, when we throw that question out to, our spouse or friends or the world at large, and the answer to that question comes back as a yes, we're really good. We feel great. We're, feel like our emotions are in a good place. We're just very grounded. But here's the problem is when we get a no to that primal question or a maybe to that answer to the primal question, what we do, and the research shows, is that we then go into what I call the scramble. And the scramble is all the unhealthy and unhelpful things we do in our lives to try to force the answer back to a yes. So let's take, Sherry, for you, for example, like people with the question, am I loved? One of the parts of their script, let's say they get a no. Let's say you get a no, you're not feeling loved by somebody. Okay. They're responding. And again, this is all living in the subconscious. It's not like somebody saying, I don't love you, but their actions or how they're interacting with you is coming back, and you're receiving that as a no or a maybe, that you may not be loved. And so what you do in your scramble, or what we will do as a question 3, am I loved, is we'll find all these ways to get this person to love us. Okay. So we can get a yes. So perhaps one of the ways we might do that is through people pleasing. Well, I'll just be the nicest person in the world to this person, then they will love me. Okay. And it's sort of this game that we play in the scramble of trying to figure out how to get a yes and really force the answer back to a yes. But the problem is that scramble burns up a lot of energy, often leads us into abandoning ourselves. So all of a sudden you're being this people pleaser and this super nice person, but your needs aren't being communicated. You're not sharing any of your opinions because they might offend somebody else. All of a sudden you have completely compromised yourself in order to get a yes to your primal question. And so this is what we want to be aware of, is what are we doing, not so much when we get a yes to our primal question, but what are the things that we do when we get a no or a maybe, because those are the things that are undermining our life.
Wow. Yes. Can you give a couple of other examples, a couple of, or maybe each of the other questions, you could give us just an example of the scramble, just a brief little, because it's so helpful to recognize that. When we can recognize it, then we can make a choice there.
Absolutely. So I'll give you a couple just different from some of the different questions. So like for me, am I safe? Part of my scramble is what I just would call hypervigilance. And this is I have this tendency in my scramble to want to know everything. I want to know all the details. And basically that desire to know everything is a way for me to manage risk and having something not go wrong in my life in order that I might be safe. Because what I want is safety, and I will figure out all the different ways to be safe. Okay. But one of the ways I do that is through hypervigilance, or another way to say that would be hyper control. So trying to control everything would be a way for me to feel safe. But I know that hypervigilance and hyper control does not make for a very good life. It doesn't create a flourishing, happy, peaceful life. But it is a way that I can force a yes back to my primal question. Am I secure, which has to do with money? A lot of times people in their scramble, when they feel like they don't have enough resource, they might start hoarding money. They might start checking their bank accounts 5 times a day. This sort of, again, I think about all the different ways to save money and to make money. And our brain just is always thinking about money and how to get more of it. Again, that's a scramble. Question 4, we certainly would see perhaps one of the things is we find people to be overly social. Again, this am I wanted is the need to be connected, but I know you've had Bob on your podcast, Bob Goff. Bob Goff, primal question is, am I wanted? Yeah. Bob is one of the things that he has to work on in his life is just this constant connection to people. He's constantly doing something with somebody, and that certainly will take a toll on him. Okay. Because part of his being with people and him feeling wanted is to be in connection with people, but that can be taken to an extreme, right? Question 5, am I successful? These folks, part of their scramble might just be win at all costs. I want to, I'm going to work 60-hour weeks to make sure that my company or my business doesn't fail, to make sure that I get that promotion that I wanted. Question 6, am I good enough? Part of that scramble would be perfectionism. Everything has to be perfect. Okay. Part of their scramble might be, how they receive feedback and defensiveness. Okay. Because if people start giving you some feedback or criticism about your work, that feels like a no. And so like all of a sudden you get sort of defensive as a way to protect yourself against that no. Question 7, this is, do I have purpose? The scramble there might just be, I've always got to be coming up with new ideas to help people and to save the world. Okay. I've always got to be coming up with I got to come up with the biggest, best idea to impact the most number of people. And a lot of times their scramble looks like, perhaps abandoning the present moment, where they're so future oriented and trying to figure out what they could do. They forget where they're at and what they can take action on now.
Wow. So in understanding these questions, I think part of your gift is it helps us understand each other, because as you go through these questions, as I hear the traits of the 7 questions burned into people's souls, it helps me understand the people in my life. And that's such a gift too. They're not just doing something to irritate me, or, they're not messed up and I'm doing this right. What's wrong with them type mentality. But, I think just understanding that is a gift to me too, to give me more compassion and understanding and empathy toward the person I'm talking with or standing beside. And another piece of this that I found so helpful was the kryptonite. Mm-hmm. Each of us has this question burned into us, and I love the thought that that's not a bad thing either. It's kind of like a map. It just helps us to understand ourselves so that we can, because I think a lot of times that question, when you ask it over and over and over and over, it feels like a burden, a place where I'm messing up. What am I doing wrong? But in a sense, when we can flip that, which I want to talk about the kryptonite a little bit, then I want to get to flipping because that's when we can start moving forward. But so each of these questions has kryptonite, something that is a no, is a big no, when we're really just my understanding is we're really just living these questions. We don't necessarily ever ask it. I think in the book you talked about, imagine you have this written on a sign on your chest. Mm-hmm. You're living it, but I wasn't really even aware that was what was going on until you simplified it so much. And it's interesting. I do that in my painting too. When I give it a title, I try to simplify it so I can understand what this is really about. But so the kryptonite is a piece that answers no. Could you go down a brief, just like you did with the questions, when the person that you're dealing with, whether it's your spouse at your work or a family member or friend, if we can recognize what their primal question might be, then we know how to say yes, and we don't want to live that kryptonite. We don't want to answer no to their question. So could you kind of run down the questions with the kryptonite? Because I think that's also so simple. It simplifies, so it helps us understand and actively move forward.
Yeah. So one of the ways that I would describe the kryptonite for each question is, imagine it is like your biggest no. It's the thing that I describe as shaking your emotional snow globe. It will instantly send you into your scramble. And so each question has a very clear sort of thing that will happen that will create that kryptonite that will send you into your scramble. So for question 1, am I safe? Unpredictability. Anything that feels like a surprise is going to feel like someone's shaking your snow globe. Mm-hmm. Question 2, am I secure? Any type of financial instability. Question 3, am I loved? Indifference. Question 4, am I wanted? Rejection will instantly shake your snow globe and send you into your scramble. Question 5, am I successful? Failure. If you fail, you're going to instantly be activated into your scramble and really be the worst version of yourself because you're getting a really big no in that moment. Question 6, am I good enough? Criticism or judgment is going to instantly send you into your scramble. That's your kryptonite. And then question 7, around do I have purpose, is really the kryptonite there is doing meaningless work or having a life where you just feel like you're spinning your wheels and not accomplishing really anything important or relevant. And so as you think about it, and your point is really important, Sherry, is that this isn't just about understanding ourselves, but it's about how we interact with each other. Because if I can understand what for Sherry, let's say your kryptonite is indifference. Okay. And how do I answer that that's a no. Indifference is a no, but a yes looks like really good listening, asking good questions, wanting to check in on you, that kind of being seen and known and heard. That feels like a yes. Well, obviously I would want our relationship to be built more around me answering your primal question with a yes versus accidentally or unintentionally answering your primal question with a no. And that's really where it gets really fun, is because then our relationships really change. They become very clear on how I'm supposed to interact with you based on your primal question and things I should try to avoid based on your primal question. Because here's the other thing that the research shows, and this is really important in terms of romantic relationships and marriage, but it's also true of work relationships, is that you can't stay in a long-term relationship with somebody who continually answers your primal question with a no or a maybe. Mm. The relationship simply won't work.
Yeah.
And so we've got to understand each other's primal question, and we've got to understand all the different ways that we can answer it with a yes and try to avoid answering it with a no or bringing that kryptonite into that person's life.
Wow, that's just beyond helpful, really. The simplicity. I love that so much. Um, well, in moving forward, we recognize our question. We begin to recognize the questions of those whose lives we touch. Moving forward, so I think this is where our paths really cross. Tiny little choices we make that help us to move forward. So maybe a tiny step or two, a choice forward for each one of these questions. In doing that, you call that our superpower, when we begin to use these years of research we've actually been doing by living these questions, when we turn that into sharing what the gift that we have. We turn it into a gift rather than a problem. So, or actually, seeing it as a problem. It's never been a problem, but
No.
yes. So,
Yeah, it's really important, like to distinguish. The
yeah.
problem is the scramble. The
Yes.
question is not
Okay.
the problem. The
Right.
question is just a need. It just represents a need that you have, and there's nothing wrong with that need. That we just need. What's wrong is when we try to meet that need in unhealthy ways, which is again is the scramble. And so we don't want to judge ourselves. In fact, we want to welcome that need. I want to welcome the fact that I need safety in my life. Okay, that's an important driver, not important, the driver in my life. Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to judge myself or belittle myself or wish I didn't have that need. I'm going to accept that part of who I am, which is really important. And then I'm going to be very strategic about making sure that I'm living with that question in a healthy way, not living in the scramble. And so there's two things probably in terms of tiny choices that we can make. The first tiny choice that we make is to live in what I call the primal truth, where we stop playing the question game and we start reminding ourselves that we can live in the truth of that need is already being met. Okay, so for example, I don't need to ask the question, am I safe? Because I know that I'm safe. Okay. Am I always safe at 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Probably not. But I have the ability to create safety for my life. I live in a home. I have a voice. I can protect myself. I have friends. I have relationships that help keep me safe. So I am safe. I don't have to live in this angst of asking that question all the time. Just like Sherry, you can live in your primal truth of I am loved, not the question, am I loved? You can look at your life, you can look at your relationships, and you can live in the knowledge and the truth that you are loved. So that's the first kind of little step that I would encourage people to take is to get real about the need and saying, hey, listen, this doesn't have to perpetually live in a state of questioning. I can change my mindset to live in the primal truth. I am loved, or I am safe, or I am successful, or whatever your question might be. And then the second part of it, in terms of action and taking a tiny step, would be the whole idea of understanding that you have a gift because that comes from your primal question. And what the research shows here, and I write about this in the book, so we take our primal question, we put it over everybody else and assume they're asking the exact same question that we are, even though they may be asking a different question. So I orient to everybody around safety because I assume that's the question that they're asking. And I do a really good job at answering it with a yes.
You do.
You walk around putting your question of am I loved on everybody, assuming that's the question that they're asking. And you do an amazing job, Sherry, at making people feel loved and seen and known. It's like that's the gift that comes from the primal question. Another way to say this, the thing that I need most is the thing that I give away the most. Okay.
That's just so amazing to me. That's how it works. Once we can understand this, then it's really simple. It all boils down to these choices, tiny choice to see this as an opportunity for me to love, for you to provide safety or security. And I love that aspect of this too, how they kind of fade a little bit into one of the 7 questions on either side.
Yes.
But
There's definitely like, and looking at the question, what I would encourage people to do is look at the question next to the question, because they're ordered in such a way that the question next to your question, which we would call the satellite question, is relevant to in terms of the gift that you provide, but also what I would just call a important secondary need that you have.
yeah. Well, I've enjoyed this immensely. Thank you so much for sharing your life work, and primarily for simplifying this for us, because it's accessible to everyone. If it's simple, because people are so busy, there's so much information out there. It's almost like we throw our hands up, because where do you start? But when given a way to simplify this and actually apply it to our lives, something we can do without anything other than reading this book, literally reading this book, or just catching up with you and learning a little bit more about this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, again, it is the thing that I would encourage your listeners to do is like, if you're interested in this and you're kind of looking to really understand yourself in a whole new way, but in a way that doesn't add weight or burden or complexity to your life, but a thing that will release you and empower you to take action in your life and in your relationships. I really encourage you, first and foremost, go take the assessment, primalquestion.com, and then the book, The 7 Primal Questions, is available at Amazon, and pick up a copy. And again, even the book is a simple read. It's not a long, laborious read. It's a very simple, fast read, and literally in 5 minutes or less, you can have a whole new understanding of what drives your life.
I agree completely, and I do love the fact that it is a quick, simple read too, because that's what people need. And once they can start living it, then lives change. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. And I hope our paths cross again soon.
I hope so too, Sherry. It's been great talking with you today.
Thanks so much. I'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks, friend.
Bye-bye.
For now.
Next time on Even Just a Little.
As I was going to these shows, it made me really surprised by the amount of hate I was getting, because in my mind, I'm thinking, the opposite of joyful is not joyless, it's judgmental.
So you were getting judgment for going to Harry Styles concerts.
Absolutely. People were saying, you used to be a corporate lawyer. Have you lost your mind? And all these things. And I'm thinking, I've had some really low lows, and I don't feel the need to justify, chasing fun and joy and a high, because there's only one rule in this book. And if something is not harming you or anyone else, we have to protect it, because so often joy doesn't show up. So if it does, I think we need to celebrate it and protect it at a minimum.
Thanks so much for joining us on Even Just a Little.